Welcome into a fresh new hour of CBS Sports HQ. I'm Jordan Giorgio alongside Haley Sutton. The anticipation, months and months of it. The wait is over. The college football playoff is here, and it begins tonight in South Bend with the first round. I'm so fired up.
It kind of already feels like Christmas. It's like that moment when like you've opened the presents, you know what you've expected, and now you're just waiting for the day to sort of
Great way to put it, yes.
Christmas spirit. Jordan mentioned it. We're getting underway with Notre Dame, Indiana. It is a big one tonight. The Fighting Kurt Cignettis facing off with the Fighting Marcus Freeman. Kind of feels like the underdog conversation in this one. I like that this is how we're kicking off the expanded college football playoff. And Jordan, I got to be honest with you, the matchup's going to be good on the field, but they're really going to be dealing with some difficult weather conditions.
Most definitely. You know, we're all warm and cozy here in the studio, but it's and it's going to be very different out in South Bend. They're going to be all bundled up. Let's go ahead and get a forecast from CBS News meteorologist Ray Patelin.
It's that magical time in the college football season where you have those big time matchups. One of them, Indiana at Notre Dame in South Bend. And while the game's between Indiana and Notre Dame, it looks like the cold is going to be one of the big players in this one. Cloudy skies and a kickoff temperature at 28 degrees. There's going to be a lake effect snow band still trying to fire off of Lake Michigan. That is going to usually, and in a situation like this, favor areas to the west. So we'll get the clouds and maybe an occasional flurry or two trying to push over into South Bend, but I don't think snow is going to be an issue for this game. The cold, that's a different story. Game time temperature, 28 degrees, couple flakes around. Temperatures are going to fall throughout the course of the game slowly into the mid-20s. So it is going to be cold from start to finish on this one, with snow being the least impactful thing of it all. Back to you at HQ.
All right, sounds good. Both teams avoiding an impactful snowfall. Thanks so much to CBS News meteorologist Ray Patelin. Joining me now here on CBS Sports HQ is our own Chip Patterson and Tom Fornelli. Gentlemen, it is great to see you. I know you are fired up for the college football playoff to finally be here. You just heard from Ray Patelin, both these teams avoiding an impactful snowfall, but those conditions, Tom, they're still going to be there. It's still going to be cold. So how does a team like Indiana match up in this game? They have all the odds against them in these conditions on the road. How do they match up in this one?
You know, I think there's an aspect to a weather game like this. Clearly, Indiana being in Indiana, the cold weather and the snow is nothing new to them. So as far as the mentality and being able to play in it, that's not a situation where maybe if you saw a team coming from the South that is used to playing in warmer weather. Where I think that this could play to the Hoosiers' advantage is a lot of times weather can be a bit of a neutralizer in a football game. So I think if you were watching that weather forecast from Ray, Indiana, you're probably hoping that maybe we get a bit more snow than they're expecting. Maybe the wind shifts and that lake effect snow starts bringing it towards South Bend, because when you get those kind of sloppy conditions, we've seen Indiana, they are the underdog, they are the Cinderella story, but when you look at the talent on both of these rosters, I think it's fair to say Notre Dame is the more talented team. So if you can find a way to neutralize that, maybe cause a few guys to start slipping on some, icy fields, that could work to your benefit. But I don't think it's going to have a huge impact in the game. But if I am the Hoosiers, I'm hoping for snow.
Yeah, I am looking at Indiana in this spot, and I'm seeing how they are tackling in the open field. Because one thing that Notre Dame has that we know about is that really good run game. And it is really a three-headed monster, because you do have Jeremiah Love, Anjadarian Price, but also Riley Leonard. He is an effective runner, and he's got a big, strong body that he can bounce off tacklers when it's 68 degrees outside. He might be even more impactful in this cold weather, in these frigid conditions, because we grew up playing football in the snow and in cold weather and the great chance to tackle your friends out there. And you know what it really hurts to do? Tackle. And so I am watching Indiana's defense in terms of how they tackle in the open field, because sometimes just one missed tackle in a game like this could end up being 40 yards that impact an entire drive. So can Indiana, when it gets to that second and third level, can they bring down those Notre Dame rushers? Because those guys are strong and those guys run physical. That's going to be a huge part when it comes to the weather impacting this game.
Yeah, Chip, just to piggyback off of that for a moment, I think we're all confident confident Indiana can win this game. I just don't know how confident we are that they actually will win this game. Tom, do you think that Indiana's schedule has left them a bit unprepared for their college football playoff debut?
Yes and no. I think that if you take like a college basketball mentality, you see a lot of teams, particularly early in the season with their non-conference schedules, schedule tougher games to try to prepare them for conference play and possibly the NCAA tournament. But you can't really afford to do that in football because for a team like Indiana, one loss typically knocks you out if you're not supposed to suffer it. But I think what works to their advantage is, while they didn't have the most difficult schedule, their two most difficult games were two of the final three games they played, that Michigan game and their road trip to Ohio State. So I think as far as environment, going to Ohio State, playing the Buckeyes on the road and losing that game, I think that prepares them for what they should expect tonight in a Notre Dame stadium that will be full, it will be loud, and, they're going to be facing a very good team. So I think they have a better idea of what to face because of that game.
Yeah, I also like the way that it unfolded. I have never been mistaken for a marathon runner, but I hear that when you're training, you build up to it, right? And that's what we saw with Indiana. The games against Washington, the games against Nebraska, we went into those games thinking maybe this is when the Hoosiers finally fall apart. And they just absolutely dismantled them. And so the fact that they ramped up to their toughest challenges of the season, Michigan and Ohio State, kind of gave them the confidence in a more natural way. And so if it had been the opposite, where they take a 23-point loss to Ohio State, maybe say the last week of September, and then blow out a bunch of cupcakes coming down the stretch, I might be more concerned. But they have felt that hostile territory, as Tom mentioned. They have gone up against one of the most talented rosters, one of the most physical rosters in the entire country with Ohio State, and the same could be said for Michigan's defensive front. So I do think that they are seasoned and ready for it based on the way that things ended. The thing that I'm curious about for Indiana in terms of its strength of schedule is what have they shown in terms of weakness against those best teams that Notre Dame might be looking to exploit, because it was very clear in the game against Michigan, a 5-point win, in the loss to Ohio State, a 23-point defeat. When you got Indiana out of its comfort zone, it did not look like the juggernaut that it looked like for much of the season. So what did they show? What can Notre Dame exploit? That's the thing that I'll probably be looking for in terms of the strength of schedule impact here.
It's interesting because I think a lot of folks do point fingers at Indiana being the team in this matchup who's unprepared, maybe the more inexperienced player in this matchup. But let's be honest here. Notre Dame, they haven't had a gauntlet of a schedule this season. Take a look at this, you guys. I get it. They're a much different team since that loss to Northern Illinois, but they maybe have been just slightly better tested than in Indiana. So, Chip, is it fair to say that this is actually the biggest test for the Irish all season?
I do, especially with the way that we saw Texas A&M kind of fall short of expectations at the end of the season. And that was even a Texas A&M team that was very different than the one that finished the season. And I really will go back to the game against USC, because not only did they go up against a lot of power conference competition that did not live up to preseason expectation, but they also didn't get tested by a lot of passing attacks like what Indiana has. They didn't have to face quarterbacks like Curtis Rourke. They didn't have to face the kinds of wide receiver play, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, that Indiana does have. And I go back to that regular season finale against USC, because what the Trojans were able to do against this Notre Dame defense, which again, against all those other power conference teams, dominated them. But USC had 557 yards of offense, including 360 through the air. And so not only are we taking a step up in competition in terms of a lot of what Notre Dame played when you face Indiana, the thing that I've got my eyes on is how does that pass defense look? Because what we saw against USC was not like everything else. And I think Indiana might even be a step up in terms of passing attack from USC.
Yeah, I feel like looking at these two teams and viewing their schedules is a great way to just compare how we view teams that we had expectations for versus the teams that nobody expected anything from, because I think you can very much argue that Notre Dame has played a schedule very similar to what Indiana played, and that Notre Dame hasn't played a team nearly as good as the Ohio State team that Indiana lost to. So we sit here and we question Indiana's credentials while ignoring that that Notre Dame hasn't played anybody as good as the Buckeyes, and their one loss came to Northern Illinois. So I think it's an interesting situation. I'm not trying to say Notre Dame's not a very good team, because they are. It's just they get that benefit of the doubt because they were supposed to be here, whereas nobody looked at Indiana before the season started and said, oh yeah, they'll be playing in the college football playoff.
Yeah, definitely didn't see this coming. All right, guys, I got to get a best bet from both of you from South Bend. Irish 6.5-point favorite heading into this game. They've covered in each of their last 8 games. That's the longest active streak right now in the FBS. Tom, what's your best bet ahead of this one?
It's not very fun, but I am going to lay the points with Notre Dame as the favorite because I like this Indiana team. They have been fun to watch all season long, but I can't help but think of how that offense struggled in those games against Michigan and Ohio State. The two best defenses that they saw this year, they really couldn't move the ball. As Chip mentioned earlier, once you get them out of their comfort zone, they didn't have a whole lot of answers. And they're facing a Notre Dame defense tonight that is just as good, if not better, than those two. So I have concerns about their ability to score, so I'm going to lay it with Notre Dame.
It's the end of the season. If you don't think I've got treasure maps that I'm pulling out of the chest left and right, you've lost your mind. Okay, so here's what we're tagging together. It's a really tough needle to thread, but I think we can do it. We're going to start with the Notre Dame team total over, which has been a bit of a wagon coming down the stretch. This Fighting Irish have a little bit of momentum to them, and I don't mean momentum like the way most people talk of it. I mean momentum like a snowball that gathers more snow and just rolls down a hill and becomes an avalanche. And that is what happens with this offense. They lean on you, they run the ball, and all of a sudden 4, 5, 6 yards becomes 14, 15, 16. And we have seen them just absolutely crush their team total overs all throughout the back half of the season. I think that ground game can play a big role in that, as well as Riley Leonard's legs in the red zone scenario. And if I'm going to go out, I'm going out on my sword. The best fourth quarter team in America, Indiana, even in a 23-point loss to Ohio State, covered in the fourth quarter with this pre-flop fourth quarter number. So we're going to go Notre Dame team total over. We're going to go Indiana in the fourth quarter plus 1.5 and thread that needle. Follow the treasure map. X marks the spot.
Oh, gentlemen, you got us locked in. I got Haley taking notes. She's placing bets. We are ready to win some money. The college football playoff begins tonight in South Bend. You know, we've made it through 14 weeks of the regular season, but it seems like the fun is just beginning. It's the first meeting between these two teams since 1991. Hoosiers hoping to get some revenge over Notre Dame team that has had their hand at home. Indiana 0-14 against the Irish at their place. Will they finally get it done tonight? Find out. Kickoff from South Bend at 8 p.m.